The New York Jets have hired a new head coach, Aaron Glenn. The Jets finally get their man after a lengthy head coach search. We're still waiting for GM news, but we're here to talk about it on the Gangs Out Here live show. My name is Ryan Sampson. I'm going to talk to right now Frankie Vidarini View, same Brian Costello from the New York Post. Guys, the Jets have a new head coach. What are your feeling? How are you feeling about the Jets have a new head coach?
Go ahead, Frankie. You started off while I tweet.
Frankie, can you hear me, Frankie? This is live
Hey,
right
what's up,
now.
guys? Sorry. Yeah. Listen, I'm not in shock. I'm disappointed. I'm sure we're gonna get into it, but hope you guys are doing well. My audio just connected, and I'm ready to rock and roll. How you doing, Coz? Right? How's it going?
I'm good, man. I'm just trying to understand how the Jets decided to come to the decision of Aaron Glenn. And this is the guy they wanted after the lengthy shirts. I think 16 coaching candidates they had chose to interview. And then Glenn is the guy they did bring in for a second interview. And now we've gotten the decision that they're going to hire him. So, Kaz, what more can you tell about the Jets hiring Aaron Glenn?
Yeah, I think it was about leadership more than anything, Ryan. If you look at his some of the defensive numbers from Detroit, they're not overwhelming. This is not like a guy who had a top 5 defense ever. So this wasn't as much about scheme as it was about finding someone who could be that leader, kind of change the culture, which is the buzzword that we always use at this time of year. But the Jets feel like they need that, and I think you talk to people that have been around Aaron Glenn. They feel like he can do that. He's been part of it in Detroit, along with Dan Campbell. So I think that's the biggest thing. I don't like you look at who they interviewed and who they didn't interview. They didn't interview Liam Cohen. They didn't interview Todd Monken. They didn't interview Cliff Kingsbury. They didn't interview Ben Johnson. And, so you look at it and that they weren't going for the offensive coordinator, that's going to come in and be this scheme wizard type of guy. They were looking more for a culture changer. And I cannot sit here and tell you whether this is going to be a good hire or a bad hire. I've been through this too many times and I've been wrong too many times about guys, and no one knows, right? There's no formula to doing this. There's no formula to the hires. I'm sure we can all think of hires that we thought were going to be great either for the Jets or for other teams. Hires we thought were going to be terrible. I looked back at the 2021 cycle recently for an article, and, Urban Meyer was praised by everybody going to the Jaguars, right? Look how that worked out. Nick Sirianni was praised by basically no one, and they might be going to their second Super Bowl under Nick Sirianni in a week. So you can't make proclamations right now, Ryan and Frankie, but I do think, the Jets were looking for a leader, and we'll see if they got one.
Yeah, Kaz, I agree. And the one thing, listen, I'm not a fan of this hire. I wanted an offensive candidate. I wanted somebody that could give us a North Star when it comes to developing an offense, finding a quarterback, developing a quarterback. That's really everything in this league. But there is something I do like about Aaron Glenn. Believe it or not, there's something I do like, and it's that he doesn't look at himself as a DC who will be the head coach. He thinks of himself as a head coach that's in the middle between the offense and the defense. So the Steve Wilks hire, assuming that's finalized, that's a great move for us. You have former head coach that really knows what he's doing defensively and can run that defense. Assuming what the offense does with the OC hire, that'll give us a lot of indication as to how this staff looks and really how Aaron Glenn could potentially hit the ground running, assuming the offense gets the hire right, which I think is the most important thing moving forward at this point.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the offensive coach that they decided to run the offense for Aaron Glenn's staff is the key hire here. Cause what more can you say about who Glenn could be potentially targeting for his staff? I know there's names being thrown out there. I saw what you wrote about it in the Post.
A lot of names being thrown out, Ryan. We'll see how it shakes out. I heard Nick Cali, who's the tight ends coach with the Rams, who had been with the Patriots before. I've heard Scott Turner, who's Norv Turner's son, and was the Commanders OC under Ron Rivera, was in Vegas, was the interim OC this year when they moved on from Getsy. I know others have reported Clint Kubiak. I've seen Mark Brunell being talked about. typically I know everyone's like, oh, the Lions, like this guy, this guy, this guy. Um, Typically when coaches leave a team, they're allowed to take like one assistant with them. Usually the head coach will say take one, but you can't take, four. The Lions obviously are losing both coordinators. So, and then they lost their defensive line coaches. Now the Patriots DC. So I don't think Dan Campbell's going to be like, oh yeah, take whoever you want, Aaron. But he'll probably let him take one. So we'll see if that's Brunell. But right now, these are the names being bandied about. I think we'll know more in the coming days about that.
Yeah, Coz, I think a lot of fans, I mean, some like Frank Geeky, I think are a little tamed about this hire because it does feel like a retread of the first time defensive coordinator
Yeah.
being a head coach. And we've seen this picture roll out continuously now, and it's never really worked out. What are your sense about the Jets deciding to go down the same road of a first time defensive coordinator being head coach?
Yeah. I'm a little surprised at the first time aspect of it because I did think they were going to prioritize in one of the two positions having someone who's done the job before, and right now it doesn't feel like either one's going to end up being that way. We'll see with the GM. I think the GM is still open. We'll see who they bring back for more interviews, but the defensive part doesn't bother me as much as I've seen like Frankie or some of the fans. It bothers. I mean, I think he's a different guy than Robert Saleh. He's a different guy than Todd Bowles, who's a different guy than Rex Ryan. Like it's Eric Mangini, Herm Edwards. We want to keep going. But I get it. I get the frustration. I understand the desire to bring in one of these offensive wizards and see if they could fix things. I just don't think. I think the Jets would be attractive to those guys, to be honest with you. I think the Jets kind of knew that. Like, if you got Caleb Williams in one place, you've got Trevor Lawrence in another place, and then these jobs where there's no quarterback, like the Jets, I'd say the Jets, Saints, and Raiders are, quarterback questions. Might be tough to attract one of those guys in this cycle, but I understand the frustration. But I don't hold that against Aaron Glenn. I still think he can be a good coach here. Like I said, there's no model. Cliff Kingsbury's being thrown around right now as like, oh my gosh, look what he's done. Well, Cliff Kingsbury has been a head coach, and he had one winning season in Arizona, if I'm not mistaken, with a young quarterback. So doesn't always work.
Yeah, it doesn't. And listen, we can speculate as much as we want, Coz. Like we've spoken about before, people thought Dan Campbell wasn't the right hire. People thought Nick Sirianni wasn't the right hire. And look at what they've proven in Philly and Detroit. My question is this, though. What is the vision, or what is a realistic plan for them to get this offense humming in some way, shape, or form? Because I'm worried about Garrett and I'm worried about Brees. And I'm even worried about Olu and Tittman and developing those offensive linemen. I don't see a plan there. And is there anything you can give us that could make those offensive people at all optimistic that this could work out for our young talent on offense?
Well, the plan is going to be up to who gets hired right now, Frankie.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Like Woody, you don't want Woody designing the plan for your offense, and Heine and Mike Tannenbaum. There's been it's hard to say what the plan is because they haven't been in place. So now, now it comes down to who the offensive coordinator is, who the offensive line coach is, who's the quarterback coach, what do they decide to do at quarterback, that kind of thing. So we'll see the plan in the coming days, I think, start to unfold. But the good news is they do have Garrett and they do have Brees. They have offensive pieces where if you go back to like when Saleh was hired, who is the best player on offense that Saleh inherited? I'm not sure off the top of my head who that was, right? So there's pieces here, and Olu, I would throw in Tiffman, like you said, on the offensive line. There's pieces here. So it's not like it's going to take, I think, some crazy scheme to get this to work. I do think they have pieces here that can be successful, but I can't answer what the plan is right now. That's going to unfold.
Yeah, it does have to unfold. Part of it is the GM part. So we heard Lance Newmark's name. He was there yesterday for an in-person second interview. Why are the Jets not making a deal here with Newmark? From all intentions, it looked like the Jets are going to hire Glenn and Newmark here. Is there still more to be? Because we're seeing now the Jets could be interviewing other candidates for a second time.
Yeah, yeah. I just put a story up a little while ago and tweeted like they're going to have people in for second interviews. I think the assumption was with Newmark, it was like, okay, he's coming in for the first time. He's the guy, he knows Glenn. But some of this right now, this time of year, is sort of putting connecting the dots, adding two and two together, and trying to figure out what's going on. It's not necessarily always right when you're doing that. No one from the Jets was saying, "Oh, this is our guy." In fact, like last night when I was checking, there was a lot of confidence that Glenn was going to get done, but people were cautioning, like, be careful about the GM. That might not happen. So, they notified some people Monday that they were going in a different direction, but they didn't notify everybody in the GM search and the coaching search. They left some doors open. So I think now you're going to see some names come in for a second interview. I don't know those names yet, but I think they'll start doing second interviews for GMs, and not that Newmark's out of it, but I think it'll be wider than just him. I think it's wise by the Jets. Like the Newmark piece to me, I'm like, I don't get like, oh, why would you just hire this guy without talking to a few more people? He's not. He might be great. I don't know, but he's not overwhelming as a candidate to me. Where you're like, oh yeah, you got to lock him up. And I get the familiarity with Glenn and that kind of thing, but I don't know. I think it's a good idea to talk to some more people.
Well, I think that's interesting, Coz, because you're seeing a little bit of pushback of the Jets hiring another head coach before having a GM place and not having that marriage set because you want them to be able to work together, right? So Newmark seemed like that fit. And I know what you're saying, like they work together, they have histories, so that makes sense. But you're saying right now it makes more sense for them to go get other interviews and get more ideas and who you think could really be the next GM.
Yeah, I don't think like the familiarity is the absolute must. I think they have to be aligned in their visions and football philosophy and understanding that. So maybe there's somebody who grew up under Parcells, that's in this GM group. I mean, Brian Gain comes to mind. He was somebody who worked under Parcells. So like, Parcells guys kind of see things the same way. So maybe it's that we've all gone to jobs, right? And you might not know anyone when you walk in the door. Like it's nice to know somebody, but you'll get to know them over time. And I think the important thing is that there's alignment there, and that they share the same vision in terms of what they want to do with the team. Because we've seen, Idzik and Rex, we saw McCagnon and Bowles, McCagnon and Gase. Like it can go off the rails pretty quickly if they don't see it the same way.
Coz, what do you think the deal will be with Glenn yearly? Do you have any idea? I know Ben Johnson reportedly got 13 mil per year.
Yeah.
Saleh, when he came here, got 5. You think Glenn's going to get what, 7-8 mil per?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the coaching money is always kind of
like unreported too. Like
well, so like the way it works, like for players, players, their contracts are filed with the Players Association and the league, and so you can access those contracts. So you can find, like, that's why the initial reports are always a little off on what players get, because the agents pump up the number and leak it out of the total amount. And then when you see the contract, you're like, okay, you can confirm the numbers. No such database exists for the coaches. So all the reporting is, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he's getting $13 million or not. I don't know. That sounds like a lot to me. But I'm not sure with Glenn, but Jimmy Sexton is Aaron Glenn's agent. He's a good agent. He's got a lot of coaches. I'm sure he got a very good deal for Aaron Glenn, especially based off of the reports that Ben Johnson got $13 million.
Yeah, we're seeing Albert Breer report that it is a 5-year deal. For Glenn. We don't obviously know how much he's making per year. It's a good question by Frankie about like how much it is, because that was part of the story yesterday, Coz, when you're like, relax, Jets fans, even though Glenn left the building and didn't sign the contract, there's still things to work out, the financials, putting his staff together, right? I think ultimately, Coz, there is obviously a lot to be told here. It feels like, though, for me with Aaron Glenn, we're getting that culture guy that you talked about, and we're getting that guy that's coming in here to basically try and reset this whole Jets franchise and establish basically, this is my way. We're gonna coach the hell out of you. We're gonna get the best out of our star players, use them the right way, and kind of just fix what's been wrong for this Jets team for a couple of years now.
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone you talk to says he strikes a really good balance between holding guys accountable, but also loving them up when he has to too, and kind of having a relationship. He was a player. I think that absolutely helps. I think that gives you instant credibility when you walk in the door. I saw it with Todd Bowles. Like, guys respect that, and so I think that helps. So I think that aspect of it is solid. But I mean, the reality to me is you have to win to develop culture, right? Like it's if you're not winning, he has a little bit of time to establish stuff, but if you're not winning, players start tuning you out. It just doesn't work. So what, like to Frankie's point, what are they gonna do on offense? Can they find a quarterback? Right? Like, I mean, you can be the greatest coach in the world, but if you're not a quarterback, you don't have a quarterback. I don't care what happens. I saw Nick Saban. Nick Saban, I think, was on the Pivot podcast, and I saw a clip of him saying, I never learned how to make bad players good. He's like, I never learned how to do that as a coach. So he goes, so what I did is I recruited really good players. And he's like, and that was the challenge in the NFL, was you couldn't do that. And, so I think that's telling. And he was talking about not getting Drew Brees with the Dolphins and what happened there. So, that's going to be the biggest question, is can they find a quarterback? And if he does that, Aaron Glenn's going to look like a really, really, really good coach.
Well, I think Frankie wants to ask you about the quarterback position here right now.
Damn right.
Go ahead, Frankie.
Because Aaron Rodgers, will he be on the 2025 New York Jets starting roster? That's what I want to know.
I do not know. How about that answer?
Oh,
2025? I'd say that, right? I have to have a take. Look, I still think I don't know what Aaron Glenn's feeling is on Aaron Rodgers. So, like, we got to see what Aaron Glenn says. We got to see what the new GM thinks. I asked somebody the other day, somebody else in the league the other day, and they were like, there's no way if you're going in there as a first-time head coach, you can have Aaron Rodgers there. They're like, he's going to have to establish the program. He's going to, he has to be the dominant figure in the organization, and you're not going to do that with Aaron Rodgers there. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see. We'll see what Aaron Glenn says about Aaron Rodgers, when he's asked, and we'll see what their actions are over here. I think, we're going to know in the next month, I would think. I think this will be worked out probably before the scouting combine at the end of February.
Coz, final question for me. As for we now have the Aaron Glenn set as head coach. The GM search is still underway. Do you think there's any names that you possibly think we could see here over the coming days the Jets could be bringing in for second interviews?
I think, Greenberg from Tampa Bay is a guy that I think got some. He had some traction. I think Sullivan from Green Bay has some traction. I heard Muji from Denver. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name the right way. I heard he did very well in the interview. So, we'll see. We'll see what they do here. I think we'll probably learn fairly shortly of who they're bringing in for second interviews, and we'll see. Now Glenn will be involved in the process.
Yep, he certainly will. Coz, we thank you as always for hopping on here live to break down this Jets hire for Aaron Glenn. I know you're looking forward to putting some questions together for Glenn and his first time speaking to you guys in the media, and we're looking forward to your coverage all throughout the coming weeks, man. Appreciate you as always.
All right, guys, take it easy.
Take it easy, Coz.
You're the man, Coz.
That is Brian Costello, Jets beat writer for the New York Post. This is the Gangzo Here live show. We're here to talk about and discuss the Jets hiring Aaron Glenn. They have a new head coach officially after a long, lengthy search. I'm Ryan Sampson. That's Frankie Vittarini from U Stadium. We're going to stay here, answer some chat questions. If you guys got questions to ask me and Frankie, we'll react to them. And we're just going to keep talking about this news today. Frankie, we knew this hire was pretty much going to come. Like we saw Aaron Glenn line up the Jets as his first in-person interview, right? For the second interview. It felt like everything was going that way. He was there at the facility yesterday, getting to meet all the staff, getting to meet all the hierarchy in the Jets, Jaime, Woody, Chris, all of them. And he leaves the building, goes on Woody's private plane back to Detroit. We get wind that this is becoming something serious. The Jets are trying to lock this up. A deal has been made. It's a very good offer. You get a little concerned, though, because I know you talked about it. Would he take that Saints offer since they let him out of the building? They end up locking it up today. I hear you on the part, Frankie, where you say this feels like a retread. This wasn't, you're not in love with this hire because it's repetitive of what Jets history has been. And Coz brings up some good points, just like you too. Listen, it's all about how he hires his staff. It's about the staff that he surrounds himself with. He has to hit home runs there. The names that they've thrown out are very intriguing, but you don't know, and I don't know if those guys are going to work out. But what you can do is view the systems they implement, the teams that they've been coaching on, how successful those teams have been, and then you got to put context into it, right? Who are the quarterbacks they're playing with? Did they develop any quarterbacks? Because this is a team, it feels like, it's one quarterback away from being a legit playoff contender, right? That's how this team feels. So that offensive staff needs to really be home run hires. What are you thinking about the names that have been thrown out there that we talked about with Coz that could be potential OCs for the Jets?
Listen, I like the Clint Kubiak idea a lot. I do. I think he comes from an experienced football background. Obviously, his father, Gary, had been in the league for a while. Listen, I think at the end of the day, the offensive coordinator that the Jets bring in is going to be the most important hire for Aaron Glenn. Clint Kubiak's an option. They have Brunell, who at this point, it's not determined whether he'll be the quarterback's coach or the offensive coordinator. He's someone interesting. And I think him being the OC really brings a breadth, a level of experience for the Jets that they can potentially take things that they were doing in Detroit and implement that stuff right away with our offense. And that's the biggest thing about Mark Brunell. So at this point, I'm not sure if he's going to be the quarterback's coach or the OC. I think give him the keys to be the OC. There were murmurs back, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years ago that Brunell wanted to be a head coach. If he can run the offense right, that's something pretty interesting there. So I would look there, and I would look at Clint Kubiak. I think what he was doing this year and what he's learned with Sean Payton, I think is very, very interesting. And it's about experience, and it's about who you're working with. That's number one to me. And Brunell with Ben Johnson, Kubiak with Sean Payton, you're not going to get better than that.
No, you won't. And I think it's interesting, Frankie. I look at the parallels of Aaron Glenn and where he learned. You talk about Sean Payton. Sean Payton's always put together very strong coaching staffs. That's always been one of his MOs. He's always surrounded himself with really good coaches on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. Dan Campbell was part of his staff back in the day. Aaron Glenn was part of his staff back in the day. He's worked on Mike Westhoff on special teams. He's always tried Vance Joseph doing a hell of a job on the defensive side of the ball. Back in his Saints days, he always put together good coaching staffs. And then you look at that tree they both come from in Glenn, Campbell, and Sean Payton. It's the Bill Parcells tree. And what did Bill Parcells always do with the Giants teams or the Jets teams? He had incredible staffs around him, guys who knew ball, guys that he can rely on. And Bill Parcells, the Dan Campbells of the world, they can be totalitarian head coaches. They can run the franchise. They can be the culture setter. They can set the attitude and how they're going to go about their business day to day. And that's what this feels like with Aaron Glenn. I know that might sound a little crazy, Frankie, but that's the parallel I'm drawing here because I think Aaron Glenn is that type of dude. He's that guy who came from the bottom, started as a scout, worked his way up as quality control coach, assistant coach, worked his way up as a defensive coordinator, became a hell of a defensive coordinator. Listen, that Lions defense had a ton of injuries this past year, and he still had them balling out. That Week 18 performance against the Vikings was pretty damn impressive considering how much talent he was missing on that defensive side of the ball. So I get what you guys are saying. It's scary because it feels like a retread, but the part of me that hopes, the part of me that looks to the future, and I have to as a Jets fan, is say, I think that this guy can truly be that full-time head coach role. And he's going to control every single aspect of the team. The question marks, though, are who's the staff and how is he going to do as a first-time head coach when it comes to when you're calling the right timeouts, when to be aggressive on fourth down, how are you going to be in red zone, how are you going to be able to defend, what are you going to be cooking up on special teams? Those are all big question marks that Aaron Glenn obviously has to answer, but I still think that this could be potentially a big step in the right direction for the Jets.
It can. And I think Aaron Glenn and his ability to want to be a head coach versus being a defensive coach is very big to me. He wants to get in there, Ryan, be the CEO of the New York Jets. And he said it. I'm going to spend as much time with the offense as I'm going to spend with the defense. There'll be no difference. He has a scouting background. He was obviously a great player. He's been in part of player development. He's coached D-backs, and he's been a defensive coordinator. The thing that he's going to need help with is offense, though. If he can nail that offensive hire, that'll be everything for him. So we're discussing Brunell. We're discussing Kubiak. Saints, by the way. I was bringing up the Broncos. Saints, too. He was with the Broncos and then the year after with San Francisco. But he's learned and he's experienced. Brunell as well. Nick Caley, I like, too. I think he's a candidate that's interesting coming from the Rams, passing game coordinator. There's something there. They just need to make sure, or they need to get a little lucky. I mean, luck is everything, man. Sometimes you propel one into an OC role, Kubiak, Brunell, or Caley, and you hope that you hit it. And but I like the fact that Glenn wants to be in the middle of the offense and the defense, whereas Saleh seemed to just want to be with the defense and then let the offense do what they do, and then he just worries about the defense. Glenn doesn't want to worry about the offense necessarily predominantly or the defense. He wants to stay in the middle, spend 50-50 amount of time. Yeah, and then let them rock and roll. So I like Glenn more than I liked Saleh, thinking about it, but
he has more experience than Glenn. You know what I mean? Like, you're comparing him to Saleh. I think you can look at Aaron Glenn played the position. Like, he can relate to the players. He can relate to a Sauce Gardner, and that's more than, like, that's no offense to Robert Saleh. Like, I know Robert Saleh was a player's coach, and he was a very motivational guy, an emotional guy. But Aaron Glenn can talk from experience and be like, this is how you do it. And he's done it at a high level, right? So, like, that, I think, relates to the players. And I think you could see it on social media. Sauce Gardner's, not Sauce, but Quinn Williams looks like he's hyped up. A couple other players have been tweeting and reacting to the news. Like, this is going to get the locker room going, Frankie. I think this is going to get them that culture that we keep hyping up and talking about for the Jets. They so desperately lack this year because this is a team that we didn't like, right? Like, the personality wise, we didn't like the feeling and the mood of the team. And a lot of it came from the top down, but I think Aaron Glenn can truly really bring the Jets to that new culture that they need and bring a fresh approach and make them a tough SOB team to play against again and play good defense. And like you said, have his hands on the offensive side of the ball. Give ideas and how they want to implement their offense and how they want to hopefully develop a new young quarterback for this team, because that's what they ultimately need to do, is get the quarterback position right. I don't know if Aaron Rodgers is going to be part of the plans next year. We don't know if Aaron Glenn is going to want him, but I hope that the Jets have a plan in place. Obviously, we still have to figure out who the new GM is, and that's going to bring me up to my next question here. And what about Lance Newmark, right, Frankie? Like, what about him? He's the first one in for his second interview, and from all intents and purposes, I legit thought he was going to be hired with Aaron Glenn, and now we get the news the Jets are going to go interview some more candidates for a second time. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I mean, Rye, I'm a little bit. This is a little bit more worrisome to me, because I think the Jets, when it came to Thomas Dimitroff, started the interview process with GMs with him, then later on with Louis Riddick, and things sort of stalled for a bit. They put all their eggs maybe in the Borgonzi basket. At the same time, they were interviewing Alec Halaby. And then things sort of fell apart after, I think, Borgonzi took that Titans job. He had taken the second interview even though he had taken the first interview with Tennessee after us. So he had just turned on Tennessee really, quickly. And at this point, we lost out on Borgonzi. It seems like Newmark, I think it's a negotiation play. I do. I think potentially because of what we had paid Joe Douglas, making him one of the highest paid GMs in the NFL, I think Newmark's looking at this, right, like, where's my bread? Like, how am I going to get my money? Honestly, you paid Douglas he was a top 3 paid GM. Yeah. I want to be top 3 paid too. Why not me? So I think there may be a little bit of a negotiation tactic on Newmark's end there to kind of get his price up. But I would go back and talk with Thomas Dimitroff. I would talk with Louis Riddick again. And my favorite candidate out of all of them, and I've brought this guy up numerous times on this show and on Twitter when I'm tweeting up a storm at 2 a.m. probably should go to sleep a little earlier these days. But Alec Hallaby,
Yeah.
bring in a forward-thinking GM, someone that values analytics, someone that's thinking about the game and where it's going. I know Lance Newmark introduced VR to Jaden Daniels, and that's like a big thing. I think Hallaby is really the analytics guy. I'm not sure Newmark's an analytics person. I know he values it.
He values it from all reports.
Yeah. But I want Hallaby, who's really about it, Rye. He's been studying it since graduating Harvard, and his role model is apparently Theo Epstein. And I want a GM like that, and that'll make me feel much better about this operation as a whole, honestly.
That feels like a very bold move if they went with a Hallaby, right? Like that's
it would be very
forward-thinking approach that they would be all about an Alec Hallaby going full analytic mode and not so much the scouting background. It'd be a bold move. I don't know if Woody Johnson would be in on that. That feels a little outside the box that the Jets regime and in this search firm, I don't know if they feel comfortable recommending that to Woody Johnson. Newmark doesn't bother me considering I looked a little bit into his past. I don't love that he was part of the Lions for 23 years, and a lot of that was losing, and a lot of that was bad football personnel. And then finally, when Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes and Spielman and these guys all came into the organization, it got better. So I don't know. There's just it's not an inspiring move, and I kind of got the sense from Coz, man. I don't know about you, but like he kind of was like, I don't know about the Newmark hire. It doesn't feel inspiring.
Yeah, he seemed that way. Yeah,
which is makes sense, I guess. But then I'm for interviewing more candidates. I'm a little worried though that you're doing this a little bit backwards and you're hiring the head coach before the GM in place, because now the GM doesn't have a say in who the head coach is. So he kind of has that forced marriage. And I know Coz says that the connection relationships don't matter that much. It kind of does in this business. Like you want that to be a proper top-down organizational structure. And I think from what I'm seeing from this search is it feels like it's going to be another one of those old organization structures of the owner and the GM, the head coach and the GM both report to the owner, and they both have the same say to the owner on what this football team is doing. And I'm not sure if that's the right approach.
Yeah, and something else, right? I think they're also giving the keys to Aaron Glenn. I really do. I think
that's the Bill Parcells model, man.
100%, man. 100%. They were all in on Mike Vrabel. They wanted Mike Vrabel to run the show here. Vrabel went to New England. Aaron Glenn showed up, and that became their Mike Vrabel. And that's what I think's going on here. They're giving the keys to Aaron Glenn. He's got the background, or at least to them he does. I'm not sure if I believe everything that he does as being some ironclad experience, resume, but Aaron Glenn's here and he's running the show. He has a scouting background. He's been a player. He's done player development. He's been a positional coach and a coordinator. Now he's the head coach. And he has the keys.
He has the keys and he has the experience, right? So that's the key.
But he doesn't really have the experience because he's never been a head coach.
Right.
But everything else checks off every box besides the last box. Yes.
Right. I do wonder if he's trying to bring his buddy Chris Spielman over.
I think he is.
Brother of the guy who's running the search with Mike Tannenbaum, has experience with the Lions, a successful organization. They really took off. They were struggling. Don't forget when they brought Chris Spielman in, and to be, I think he's the vice president of the Lions organization. I think he's under Brad Holmes, who's president and GM, if I'm correct, or, he's in part of that structure, but they really took off when he became part of that culture. And I listened to Peter Schrager on Kevin Clark's podcast, and it was a really good bite about how he talked about when Chris got the job with the Lions after they had that really bad season. Chris was at the scouting combine, and he asked Peter to come into the room, in the Lions room, when they were watching players. And he walked in the room, and Aaron Glenn was going off, watching one of the players have a really good workout and be like, I love this guy. Get this guy. This is the guy and Peter's like, wow, he's really animated over there, Aaron. And Chris goes, I love him. He goes, I love him. He goes, he's all about football. That guy loves, breathes, and talks football. It's a great story. If you know what I'm talking about, go to Peter Schrager's social media or Kevin Clark. They tweeted out that clip today talking about Aaron Glenn as the candidate for the Jets head coaching job. And it just talks more about the type of candidate Aaron Glenn is and what he's going to bring to this Jets organization. He loves the Jets, man. Like, that's another thing, Frankie. Like, he wanted the job. Like, that can't be overstated. This was not a fondly looked at job. Let's be real. Mike McCarthy didn't
No,
want to
not
come
really.
here. Coz hinted at it. Mike McCarthy didn't want to come here. Pete Carroll didn't want to interview here. Vrabel, I think, was interested if the Patriots job never opened up. Like, it wasn't a destination job. But the fact that this guy was universally praised for his leadership, for how he coaches players, how he relates to players, and how he has great experience from the bottom to the top of an organization, it's a hell of a hire. Now it's just a matter of how he puts it together.
The only thing is, yes, he is on paper, he checks off enough boxes. My issue, again, is when is this offense going to be able to put up enough points and have a quarterback run the show on offense that is going to be able to actually compete in this league? When is that going to happen under this Aaron Glenn tenure? When? That's the biggest question mark in this all. Because, Rye, if it's going to take 3-4 years and we make the playoffs 1 out of 5 years or 4 years, these fans, you know how they are. You know how we are.
Yeah.
We're going to want you out of town, tonight.
That's what Coz said. He says Winning's going to cure all with this thing.
Of course. And that's my biggest concern is how much time are we going to give Aaron Glenn to get this right? You got to give him a year. I'll be honest. I didn't like the hire necessarily. You got to give him at least a year. You should give him 2 years. There's Jeff fans. They don't want to give him 2 games. I'm just letting you know. I mean, if you read
I think fans are overreactive.
Of course they are.
We're crazy.
That's New York fans for you. Yeah.
We're eager. We want success. Success is not microwave. Like, I think you've said it brilliantly this year when we did post-game shows. You can't microwave success, and you can't microwave putting a team together. And I don't think Aaron Glenn's into that. I think Aaron Glenn's into just like the Lions model, build it from the bottom and get it up and get this team into a good position to have long-term success. I do want to bring up Rich Cimini. Just tweeted he talked to Bill Parcells. Just got off the phone with him after Aaron Glenn was hired. Bill Parcells is Aaron Glenn's mentor. He doesn't get excited about too many things. He's pumped up for Aaron Glenn. They still talk regularly, Glenn and Parcells. Parcells said, I know he's done an awful lot of diligent work to prepare himself to be a pro coach. He worked hard over the years. He started in scouting, which is a very good place to start, and learned about personnel acquisition, prototypes, and things like that. He knows all of that. So, listen, Bill Parcells is considered one of the best coaches of all time, one of the greatest coaches of all time. He's excited. Aaron Glenn is one of his mentees, and I don't know, man. Like, part of me hopes that this is like part of that Bill Parcells tree, and if he can have success like a Sean Payton and a Dan Campbell, sign me up, Frankie. Sign me up, man.
Yeah, man. I mean, yeah, that's the hope. And, he said something on the Pivot podcast, Aaron Glenn, which I really liked. When there were rumors of him being traded, he goes into Parcells' office and he asks Bill. Bill tells him, hey, come sit down, Aaron. He goes, what's the problem? Aaron goes, I've been hearing rumors that I might get moved. And Parcells says to Aaron Glenn, listen, kid, or however he referred to him. I think he said kid. I'm not sure. But he goes, listen, Aaron, this is the NFL. Every single player has a price tag over their helmet. Every player. And Aaron said, I felt that. I understood what he was saying. And that's when I really got the brutal reality of the business that is the NFL. And to this day, he still brings up that story. He brought it up on the Pivot, and I've heard it before years ago too. But he got some really tough lessons from Bill Parcells that I think could potentially translate anywhere, especially in New York. And that's the biggest thing. I am very curious how he handles the media, because Robert Saleh got a little too buddy-buddy with the media, a little too lax, talked a little too much. Sometimes with the media, you have to be stern, direct, and maybe don't tell them everything. You don't have to lie, but sometimes being, too open and honest is not a good thing. And I think Robert Saleh felt the heat from those interactions, especially with other hosts on other shows, text messages being leaked.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a bad look, man. I'll tell you right now, Aaron Glenn ain't doing that. That's for sure. That won't happen with Aaron Glenn. So I'm more optimistic in that regard. My only concern, I'm going to repeat myself again, is the quarterback and offense. If that can be done right, you'll stop hearing from me. But Aaron Glenn is a quality candidate for the job, and I wish him all the best. I really do. And I think if certain hires come into play and the quarterback can be developed,
Would that make you happy?
that would make me so happy, man. It's cold now. I'm waking up with a stiff neck, my back. I'm getting old, man. I'm getting grays. I looked at myself today. I'm like, man, I'm getting old, man. What's going on with me? But that would make me happy, right? Are you
Listen,
happy?
I'm happy with this hire. I know you're not as happy, but I am. Again, I'm going to look at the glass half full and say, this is a guy that's been universally praised. He's the guy, and he wanted the Jets job,
Yes,
something
sir.
that you don't see very often. And
Yep.
I think he welcomes it. I think he welcomes the media. I think he welcomes the criticism, the feedback, the constant attention, the dysfunctional owner, the dysfunctional franchise. He welcomes all that because he was here when they were successful with Parcells, when they did, win a bunch of games and go to the playoffs and build a consistent winner. I think he wants that. He wants that. And he wants that responsibility. And he wants to prove that he's one of the best. That's a guy I want. Like, I understand
Right,
Robert
breaking
Saleh.
news on the show, by the way. The
Go ahead.
Jags just fired their
I saw
GM
that.
Trent Baalke. Yep.
So it's another GM opening. It's another GM opening, right?
Yep.
So
Yes, sir. Yeah.
now the
So they better
Jets are
get this hire in quick.
exactly. So now you have to wonder, what are the Jaguars going to do? Because Liam Cohen straight up turned them down in the public eye and said, I'm going to go back and make the most money as an offensive coordinator. I don't want to work with Trent Baalke, even if though it's Trevor Lawrence and a bunch of pieces. I'm not interested in this job. So another GM opening. The Raiders just filled their position. So it's now the Jets and Jaguars still looking for a GM, right, Frankie? So they got to get their hire right. They interviewed 15 GM candidates. One of them's got to be it. One of them has to be it, Frankie.
Yeah. And you know what, Rye? I'm not trying to be too negative today. We hired a new coach. We're gonna hire a new GM. Give it some optimism. But this 33rd team, man, the process that they went through to ultimately have a second interview only placed with Aaron Glenn and Lance Newmark, and you hire Aaron Glenn, and that's the only second interview that's been reported that they've done. What kind of process is that? You could have literally have figured this thing out. Me and you could have figured out this process. We could have gone Aaron Glenn in there. Honestly, I get talking to more people than less sometimes is a good thing because you don't know who's going to really get your wheels turning. But what kind of process was this? Literally, there's no second interview scheduled outside of the one interview, the one candidate you hired. The other one we may hire or not. I don't know. It just seems like it's just very strange to me. I don't know what
it
the
was a
logic
very
was.
lengthy. Yeah, I mean, it was a lengthy process to come to the conclusion. A guy that wanted the job and coveted the job, I think, for over a year now, you ultimately ended up hiring. Like, I think Aaron Glenn could have been hired without the 33rd team, if I'm being frank. It felt like you interviewed a bunch of guys just for the sake of interviewing a bunch of guys, and none of the guys you interviewed were the top OCs. None of the guys were a Liam Cohen, a Joe Brady, Ben Johnson. None of these guys were interviewed by the Jets. And it makes you wonder, is Woody Johnson still telling the 33rd team, like, I don't feel comfortable going that route? Because this feels comfortable for him. Hiring the defensive coordinator, hiring the first-time head coach defensive coordinator that's going to have that, attitude of, I'm going to control the locker room my way. That's been his MO now for 20 plus years when he runs this team.
Yeah. And I think right now, and I kind of was thinking about this the other day, I broke down really what Aaron Glenn needs to do because I had a feeling we were going to hire him days ago, as we all did. So when you're not going the offensive head coach route, I have a few pieces of criterium that you need to hit in order to be successful. You have to build a strong culture. You have to hire a top OC with some forward-thinking creativity, scheme up some things to open up space and make life easier for your offensive players so they can get yak, and you don't have to overcomplicate it, but you have to be creative. You have to develop or acquire an above average quarterback. Doesn't have to be elite, just above average. If the OC is a top one, you'll be okay. And you need an opportunistic defense that has a quality pass rush. Now, examples of that, the Patriots, that's why they hired Vrabel, right? The Ravens, they don't have an offensive-minded head coach with John there, but they have those elements. They've won Super Bowls, both those teams doing that. The Steelers, the same thing. The Seahawks have done that in the past, and now they're trying to recreate that with Mike McDonald. And the Lions are doing that now with Dan Campbell having the top OC and Ben Johnson. They had, not anymore, Jared Goff, etc. You see the Commanders doing that now, right? Dan Quinn. Now, their shortcoming may be they don't have that opportunistic defense with the quality rush that could take away from there. But I think
it's year one with them, man. They still got to build that thing out. I mean, it's only Adam Peters and Dan Quinn's first year, and they're in the freaking NFC Championship game with a rookie quarterback.
Yes, sir.
Think about it. Think about the potential the Commanders can have here for the future.
Yeah.
Aiden Daniels is special.
Example of that, right? Buffalo Bills. Strong culture, top OC and Brady, elite quarterback or above average on this list quarterback, and an opportunistic defense that gets sacks when you need them. Now, Von Miller's doing his thing. I mean, they have guys up front that are making plays. So the Jets need to follow this model. If they do, I think they can be successful. Now this isn't like the Bible of building a team or something, but you know, like it's general things that are pretty obvious for the most part, but like they need to do that. And yeah, so I mean, two of those things are offensive based, and I'm curious how they're going to figure those two things out. Are offensively based.
You and a lot of Jets fans like myself, we're all wondering who this staff is going to be and how they're going to build it out and who's going to be their quarterback they want to get. And if it's this year too, you got to think about, like, it's Tyrod Taylor and Jordan Travis, the only quarterbacks under contract. Aaron Rodgers is technically, if he comes back. Do they go that route? Do they draft someone this year? Do they draft and develop a player this year? Do they have him sit behind Aaron Rodgers? Do you go in with a makeshift, go get a Justin Fields, bring him in and have him compete with Tyrod Taylor? Do you trade for a quarterback like a Kirk Cousins if he ends up being on the trade market, or if he gets released, you bring him in? There's a lot of there's not many options, I should say, but there's different routes to go. And then there's always 2026, which is supposed to be a loaded quarterback draft class. You could go all in for 2026 to draft your future quarterback. I think we're going to be paying attention to that over the coming days, Frankie. I know there's still a lot to talk about with this Jets team. They still got to find the GM like we're talking about. He's got to have a huge say in what they're doing to build this team and how they plan to go with the quarterback route. But Aaron Glenn is the new Jets head coach. I appreciate you, Frankie, for hopping on live here to break this down, this new hire, this new regime that's taking shape. I'm sure we'll do this again when they make their hire for the new GM, and we'll discuss that. As the staff is put together, we'll react to that. And the offseason is officially off, Frankie, and still a lot to go. I appreciate you, buddy. Any final thoughts before we close this out?
My only final thought is this. I do not want to go through another season of watching Jets football like we did this past year. That's it. I either make it worse, so we're tanking and I'm thinking about Archie Manning in November, or get us to the playoffs. This year was brutal. It was like a slow, just bleeding out death. Like I can't do it anymore. This year was too much to handle. So please, next year, either be playoff worthy or be in contention to maybe make the playoffs, or just be really bad so I don't have to think about it. Like, oh, what if, this past year, right? Every game we'd win, you're like, Frankie, please, like enough. But no, I appreciate you. I appreciate the post. And it's a new era of Jets football. It's new life. So we could, make, prognostications as to this will happen or that. Nobody knows at the end of the day. Nobody knows.
But what we do know is Aaron Glenn is the new Jets head coach. Jets fans, get hyped about it. Get excited about it. Thank you for watching. Hit that like, hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. There's going to be a ton of coverage coming in the weeks here as more and more news comes out for this Jets team. We appreciate you as always for watching. Like I said, hit that like and subscribe button. And until next time, Frankie, the Jets have a new head coach. So we ended as always. Go Jets.